verse or chorus, and I'll tell you which is which. Then I'll tell you that this form is called an octastitch. I'm pants at reading music, and I don't have perfect pitch. But when it comes to writing songs, I've got to scratch that itch. HFO goes live on air, we all expect a glitch. 'Cause every show I do, I know that I will find a hitch. I'm not expecting what I do to ever make me rich. I'm having fun with making music here right now with you on Twitch.
Good evening, one and all. Good evening to Array of Emotions. Good evening to Neuro. Good evening to Riako Music. Good evening, Wobby, as well. I hope you are all well. I hope you are all doing okay. Anyway, it's March the 25th, which means that it is one of my favourite drummers' birthday. So happy birthday to Mr. Chad Wackerman, who had a long and storied career with a certain Mr. Frank Zappa, but also ended up playing drums in weird time signatures with my hero, Mr. Alan Holdsworth, who has got a new album out despite the fact that he died in 2017. It's a TV broadcast of a German show from Leverkusen in 1997. So sadly, Chad is the only surviving member of this lineup. Alan died in 2017. Dave Carpenter, the bass player, died in 2008, I think it was. Given the opportunity, I rave about Alan Holdsworth at every opportunity, because there was not another guitarist on the planet quite like Mr. Holdsworth, and I was lucky enough to see him live many times. Actually shook the man's hand after one concert many years ago. But yeah, so that album was released this month, and a copy is winging its way to me. It was a German TV appearance, so not only is it a CD with the music on, there's a DVD of the performance as well, so yay! The number of times that I faff around with the audio levels, because there's the audio controls on my little Zoom camera there, there's the audio controls on the mixer, there's the audio controls on the user interface, there's the input on the Mackie monitor controller, there's the output on the Mackie controller, there's the studio output on the Mackie controller, there's the headphones mix output on the studio controller, and they all affect what goes into OBS, and quite frankly it drives me nuts. So yeah, I'm just a little bit hotter on the right hand channel than the left, but I can barely see the controls because I haven't got the top light on, because that buggers up the camera feed. Oh, I'm such a slave to my art, I really am. But yes, I guess keep it simple, stupid doesn't apply to audio engineering, says Array of Emotions, and he's not wrong. So yeah, can we fix that in post? Not really, but yeah, tomorrow I'll just mono the first 5 minutes or so of the show, and we'll deal with it that way, I guess. Anyway, where was I? Yeah, I needed something to sort of cheer myself up, because I'm struggling at the moment. I have to say, I haven't really done an awful lot since last Sunday's show, I've a feeling that this is kind of the post-February album writing month crash, that I'm kind of coming down from being totally focused on music and being focused on music pretty much since 5090 started on the 4th of July last year, because I kept going after I refitted the studio in here so that I could learn how the studio behaved. I was doing an album every month. Reacco Music says, it's okay, you probably need the rest. I like I say, I've been sleeping for Britain at the moment, but the trouble is it's not been particularly good sleep. And that is because I'm a bundle of aches and pains, and I think it's arthritis and old age, and it's shoulders and elbows and legs and just about everywhere else. But I forced myself to do some gardening this week, so I was out in the sunshine on Monday doing a lot of pruning, and let's face it, some of the plants in my garden had rather taken advantage of me being ill last year, and one in particular, which I normally try and keep to about chin height, was 11 feet tall. Reacco Music says, I saw the photo. Yeah, that tree was up level with my head, standing in my bedroom on the first floor, and now it isn't. So yes, 5090, you write 50 songs in the 90 days between the 4th of July and the 1st of October, right? So that's months away, too long away. So what people are doing this year is 5090 the prequel, which starts on April the 4th. So there are 90 days between April the 4th and July the 3rd. So you write 50 songs before 5090 starts, and then you write another 50 songs during the 90 days from the 4th of July to the 1st of October, which means that's 100 songs in 180 days. And yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make an album on Bandcamp and call it 5090 the prequel. And then every time I record a song for 5090 the prequel, I'm just going to plonk it in the album page on Bandcamp. And that means I'll have an album, and I'll make it pay what you want, as I have done for all the other albums that I've released since October. You will get an album that by July the 3rd will have hopefully at least 50 songs in it. But you know me, I'm going to overachieve, because last year I think I did 75 songs in 5090. So Areva Motion says that's a crazy amount of songs. But that's kind of the point. For songwriters, you get a little bit better with every song you write. Right, it's like Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, the 10,000 hours things. You've got to put in the work to get to the point where your work's actually good enough for people to go, oh, that's rather good work. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing. So that's 5090 the prequel, starts on April the 4th. So I've got to make it to April the 3rd, and then I'll be off and running again. So that's the plan. While we're on the interwebs, I have another couple of things for you. So the first is that there is a rather lovely new contact instrument on Piano Book, which is called Soundscape Guitar. Let me play you a little bit of the demo. It's beautiful. So go over to pianobook.co.uk, and if you have the full version of Contact, you can download that and add it to your musical practices. Also, if you have Contact, the lovely people at Klang in Cologne, They do free instruments for Contact every month or so, and they've got another one out, and it's mad. It's called Stack of Wood, and it's kind of marimba-y, as they say, but if I play the audio, when you play a note, you don't just get the note, it just goes off and does its own lovely thing. So it sounds like this. It's rather cool, isn't it? I rather like that. Mike Tango Charlie, good evening, good evening, good evening. Riako Music says, I bought the Ableton stuff from Clang. They won't work for some reason. Contacted support and the host never replied. That's not good. That's annoying about the sample libraries. I'm still waiting for Native Instruments. I've given up expecting any sort of response from their online support form. It's just... Mike Tango Charlie is now describing the aircraft he flew, which was a Victor Air Tourer, good for light aerobatics. Right, yes, I think I wouldn't push my luck in a small aircraft. Well, I wouldn't push my luck in any aircraft whatsoever by doing aerobatics in it. I have been offered, many years ago, I was offered, while I was flying a glider, the instructor said, do you want to loop the loop? And I said, how about no? And I do not regret that decision for 1 minute. Raka Music says, I hate when support doesn't get back to you. Yeah, me too. It's annoying. But I have been plugging on in my own way with music. So it's finished doing its thing now. Let's go back to presenter mode. Yes, we're back in Ableton. And you remember I said that I was playing with the inspired by nature tools that were in one of the new packs for Ableton Live 11. Well, I've been seriously getting to grips with them. And... Rev Emotion says, oh, not even one little loop? No, not even one little loop. Yeah, so I thought what I'd do, because not only is it Chad Wackerman's birthday today, it is also iconoclast and curmudgeon, the late John Keel's birthday today. He would have been 91 years old had he not died a few years ago. I was listening to an excellent podcast called something like 9 Angles of John Keel this afternoon, which was a reminiscence with various people talking about John Keel's work. And I thought, this is the guy who wrote the Mothman Prophecies. And if you're friends with me on Facebook or Instagram, you'll have seen that I posted a few of my John Keel books today on Instagram. And my copy of the Mothman Prophecies impressed the hell out of Arthur, because he went, that's Frank Frazetta. And it was like, yep. Frazetta actually illustrated a whole swathe of John Keel's books in the 1970s and 80s, and they're all completely over the top. But yes, John Keel, birthday today, weirdness. So I thought what I'd do is I'd extemporise or even improvise and do it by demonstrating what I've been putting together using the Inspired by Nature pack and a bunch of other stuff in Ableton Live 11, and taking full advantage of the fact that some of these instruments basically just go off and do their own thing. I don't have to control them at all. I just hit play and off they go. So just in case this turns out to be one of those things where I think, wish I'd recorded that, I am going to start it off by hitting the record button, and that is to reiterate the lesson that I delivered last week. An important thing: if you're improvising, hit record first, because it might be something that you really, really wanted to keep. So you could say that about anyone. He, she would be X years of age had they not died. Yeah, like Joanna Southcott, she of the mysterious locked box fame and fortune, who would be 200 if she hadn't snuffed it quite a long time ago. Anyway, let's rewind to the beginning. Let's hit record. And if you'll indulge me for a few minutes, I'm just going to play stuff and see what happens. So here we go. First of all, I'm going to enable one of the Inspired by Nature tracks, which is called Bell Freezes. What is the locked box thing? I'll tell you about that afterwards. So to put you in a weird frame of mind, here is something that I've randomly titled Naturally Weird, in honour of Mr. John Keel's 91st birthday. So, yeah, Mike Tango Charlie says, bit Blade Runnery there, Memories of Green. And yes, that's due in no small part to Arturia's lovely emulation of the Yamaha CS80, which was Vangelis's toy of choice in the early 1980s when he had a studio. I don't know if Nemo Studios still exists, but certainly he used to be based in London and had a lovely studio space therein. And he had something on the order of 8 Yamaha CS80s, which is a lot of synthesizers. 8, says Ryako Music. Yes, 8, because the CS80 was a synthesizer that originated in the 1970s, and electronics back in the 1970s weren't quite as reliable as they are these days, and 2 or 3 of them would usually be in the repair shop being fixed. So he just had rather a lot, and they're lovely sounds, aren't they? This is from the Inspired by Nature pack. So if I go over to presenter mode, so they're now just disappearing into the distance thanks to the ping pong delay that I've got. How many arms did he have again, says Mike Tango Charlie? Yeah, Octopus Man, says Ryako Music. I mean, they're big buggers. They weighed, I think it was something on the order of 200 pounds. And the band Toto, as in Africa, because all the synth sounds in Africa and Pamela and all the other hits off Toto 4, was it? All Yamaha CS80. What I had on there are a number of instruments that I was playing. The Vangelis one is this CS80. So, I mean, you can see the thing's quite significant, and you can see the wiring loom on the top, that it was a bit old school. You know, it wasn't Raspberry Pi on a little printed circuit board the size of a cigarette packet. It was huge, and they weigh a ton. But that brassy pad is the Vangelis noise, frankly. Except that it's being mangled. And I have a track here called CS80 Mangler. And what that is using is one of these grain delay settings, which is another new thing. I think it's new in Live 11. And it does weird things to a sound, and pitch trails is definitely a new thing in Live 11, and that basically takes a sound and then repeats it, and it either goes up or it either goes down. So that's basically the plugin that will let you turn into Marvin from the Paranoid Android. So if I turn that track off and just play the CS80, and again, because I've got this lovely Native Instruments Complete Control keyboard, if I switch to Studio Cam, you can see what I'm doing. If I dig in, and shall we get rid of the delay for a bit, because the delay is a bit over the top, and we'll get rid of return from delay as well, because I'm doing even more things with so the delay's being delayed through the vector delay, which is another inspired by nature pack, and that is really odd. It does really weird things. So if I change some of the settings on vector delay, what I can do, I can it becomes hypnotic after a while. So let's go back to the attractor, shall we? So Record Music, that's flying through LA 2019 in a police spinner. So absolutely. And it's all about the pitch bend is the Vangelis stuff. So yeah, that's the CS80. What else have we got? I started off with the inspired by nature FM. You drop a sample in the instrument there, and then you position an emitter and walls, and it just does weird things. And that's also kind of a bit of a Blade Runner-y sound as well, come to think of it, isn't it, really? That's like, rather than flying around in a spinner, this is creeping through a very, very waterlogged and decrepit version of the Bradbury building in Los Angeles, isn't it? Like Tango Charlie says, I remember hearing that as a kid, and I've never heard anything like so futuristic and unearthly, even 30 years later. Vangelis is just... Vangelis wrote the soundtrack for the future. And actually, I have a correction to make from last week's show. I said, and Atitlan was watching, and he said, I think Albedo 0.39 was my first piece of Vangelis. It wasn't Albedo 0.39, because I went through my vinyl collection. It was Heaven and Hell that was the album that was used extensively for Carl Sagan's television series Cosmos. And that was the one with the sculpture of two hands made out of glass with little wings on their wrists playing the piano. And it was, absolute concept album nirvana, because the heaven side, the hands were it was all nice blue sky and everything. And then you turn the album over and it was exactly the same sculpture, but they were all lit by red flames, and it was obviously very demonic. But that album, Heaven and Hell, if you've not heard it, do track it down, because it is glorious. Hello, Kukariku 3000, welcome to you. So yeah, that's another rather nice synth. And to counteract the rather nice synth, you've got to have some radioactive pianos, haven't you, really? So this is a contact instrument that you can buy. These nutters went into the exclusion zone around Pripyat, just outside the Chernobyl power station in Russia. And Pripyat was quite obviously evacuated in 1986 following the Chernobyl disaster. Various pianos were left abandoned in Pripyat, and these guys went into Pripyat and sampled the pianos and then made a contact instrument out of them. And they also, how I'm all about the convolution reverbs and recording an impulse response. a very, very short, sharp sound of white noise, and you record how that burst of white noise fades away into the distance, and then you drop that impulse response into a convolution reverb, and the reverb will then make any sound that you feed into it sound as if it was being performed in the space that the impulse response came from. So what you can do with the Pripyat pianos is there's a whole bunch of different convolution reverbs. There's Lenin Square, which was the main square in Pripyat, where the Pripyat Palace of Culture and the Hotel Policia are located. You can sound a piano as if you were in that square. Here you go. And there's a whole bunch of extra echo on that. But I left that, so is the cooling tower. There we go. Rather splendid, with a bit of Valhalla Supermassive on the top of it. Rieko Music says, wait, aren't there people who chose to live there again in Pripyat? No. The radiation count in Pripyat is very high. You would not want to stay in Pripyat for very long, if at all. So in each of the, I don't know if you can see this on the plugin, but there you go. In the water cooler, the gamma radiation background is 2.25 microsieverts an hour. And in some of the others, like the swimming pool, it's 0.3 microsieverts an hour. And in the core chamber of reactor number 5, which wasn't actually commissioned, 0.45 microsieverts an hour. So in the cooling tower is a bit hot, shall we say. So you don't want to, and there you go, near reactor 4, 3.75 microsieverts an hour. You would be very ill very rapidly hanging around Pripyat. However, Moses, I heard it's about comparable to what an X-ray generates, but that could be very wrong. It's a long time since I was a classified person, meaning that I used to work in the nuclear industry and had to have a track every year of how much radiation exposure I'd been exposed to. But I think even in a year, I hadn't managed more than 2 microsieverts, and that was after clambering up and down nuclear reactors in various parts of the UK. But that was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Mike Tango Charlie says, yeah, I'm pulling these figures out of my ass, but by any account, you don't want to hang around. Yes, exactly. I mean, if you've not come across the lovely people who are Festival of the Spoken Nerd, that's Steve Mould, Helen Arney and Matt Parker. They do a whole bunch of science-related comedy. They've got several CDs and several DVDs. The DVDs are brilliant. You need to check the Festival of the Spoken Nerd. There's one called You Can't Polish a Nerd. They're all great DVDs, but Helen has written a banana song, and during the banana song she recounts how many bananas it would take, because bananas are rich in potassium, and potassium is mildly radioactive. So if you eat a banana, you get a dose of radiation. Riako Music says, did you wear protection? Like, did they give you a suit? Oh, so talk amongst yourselves for a question. That was a QI question, says Array of Emotions. Yes to Riako Music's questions in both instances. So what I'm now doing, my career back then, I was an instructional designer, right? So it was a great job because as an instructional designer, your job is basically to find out loads and loads and loads and loads of really interesting stuff and then explain it to other people who hadn't had the experience of having an expert talk you through it. So it was basically just sort of recounting other people's expertise, second or in some cases even third hand. But it was huge fun because the sort of stuff that I'd get asked to do varied tremendously, from teaching people how to fly helicopters to installing state-of-the-art tape backup systems that could store, almost a gigabyte, to what to do if your nuclear reactor suddenly starts melting down. And got to fly in a Hercules. So I was very, very impressed with the opening sequence of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier last week, because the Falcon, without going into spoiler territory, let's just say that the Falcon has to rescue somebody from a Hercules, which is a 4-engine transport aircraft. And it's like, yep, okay, I'm sold. That looks like a proper inside of a Hercules to me. Right, and we are back. Might help if I actually made those extra large icons, then I can actually see what I'm scrolling through. There are an awful lot of pictures of Array of Emotions and Riako Music in here. So if I just open that one, just to keep you entertained for a bit. Here's a blast from the past, right? How about that? Array of Emotions and Riako Music and Neuro. And yes, you do look very cute. You all look very cute, and you all look incredibly young, which I didn't even back then. So there you go. Right, I am desperately trying to... I will find that elusive photograph for next Sunday's show, and you can have a look. Riako Music says, crap, we're old. Riako Music says, Mike Tango Charlie says, my dad occasionally mentions riding in an Iroquois while armed with an AR-16, which certainly paints a picture. It certainly does. Yeah, my job, I spent quite a few months working in Tampa for a company who made flight simulators. And I realised that if I stayed at work until about 6:30, 7 o'clock, when everybody else had gone home, the guys who ran the sims would go and have a play. So I'd hang around and they'd put their heads around the cubicle and go, do you want to come and fly a Black Hawk? And I go, oh, yes, please. And we'd go down into the simulator hall, and there'd be one of these big boxes on hydraulic stilts, and we'd all climb in and fire all the visual systems up and go and fly around South Korea, for some reason, was the database that they had. But it was rather fun. Right, Riako Music says, I'm going to keep asking about the locked box thing. Right, Joanna, so this is tonight's Chris investigates Fortiana, right? Joanna Southcott was a bit of an eccentric, shall we say, and would make prophecies. So this is going back 200 years ago. So witchcraft had only just stopped being a fairly serious crime. So she was a seeress. She was a mystic. Mike Tango Charlie says, yeah, now it's just a misdemeanor. And it's really interesting, actually, how from like the 1730s, I think, was the last prosecution for being a witch. And then as the Enlightenment kicked in and science started taking over, it's really funny, right? In the 18th century, to start with, you were prosecuted for being a witch. By the end of the 18th century, you were prosecuted for claiming to be a witch. It's really interesting how it changed, because by the end of the 18th century, science, and people said, well, there's no such thing as witchcraft. So we can't prosecute people for being something that we don't believe in. So we'll just prosecute them for saying that that's what they do. Mike Tango Charlie says, simple solution. Does she float? Bada! Yeah. So Joanna Southcott got progressively weirder as she got older. And in her 60s, if I'm remembering this right, she claimed that she was pregnant with the Messiah. Okay, could be wrong, but this is what I remember. So she claimed she was pregnant with the Messiah, and the Messiah would show up and bring about the apocalypse. This did not happen, strangely enough. Reactor Music says, that's a hell of a claim, literally baby Jesus. Yes, exactly. So, yeah, it's one of these, like old Mother Shipton's prophecies that turned out not to be particularly prophetic at all, that were revealed a few years ago. Well, Joanna Southcott's box, basically there's some doubt as to whether the people who say they've got Joanna Southcott's box have got the genuine box. Because after 200 years, people wanting to make a fast buck out of gullible people used to show up claiming that they'd got the one and the original Joanna Southcott's box. And as Mike Tango Charlie says, we all know the relic industry. Well, the Joanna Southcott's box spawned its own branch of the relic industry. And the medium and psychic Harry Price, you ever heard of him in the early 20th century? Acquired a Joanna Southcott's box. Which he didn't break the seals, because apparently, like crossing the streams, breaking the seals on Joanna Southcott's box is generally considered to be a bad thing. So, long story short, nobody actually knows what's in the genuine Joanna Southcott's box, or even if it still exists, or where it is. But Harry Price did not open his, but he had it x-rayed, and there, amongst other things, it had a bunch of nails, a bunch of what looks like lace, and a gun. So who knows what's in the box, says Ryako Music, like in Seven. So no human head in Joanna Southcott's box. So I hope that will reassure Ryako Music that is the case. I like how you spoke that. Some nails, some lace, and a gun. Wait, what? Says Mike Tango Charlie. Well, you've got to leave the best till last, haven't you? You've got to read books, kids. It's the way to keep sane. It's the way to find out interesting things. It's the way to find out other points of view, other versions of reality, as you wish. And I have vowed that by the end of this month, I am going to bloody well finish reading James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, because I am not going to let the bugger beat me. And it's been a year since I started reading it. And I know it's been a year since I started reading it, because I remember sitting in the audience waiting for William Gibson to be interviewed at Westminster Hall back in February 2020 for the agency book launch, and Jules, who was sitting next to me, said, "What are you reading at the moment?" I said, "Finnegan's Wake." And I think at that point, if it wasn't Nick, then it was somebody else from the William Gibson book crew said, "Why on earth would you subject yourself to doing that? You're a masochist." And quite evidently I am. And I ended up having to buy Joseph Campbell's skeleton key to Finnegan's Wake to make sense of quite a few chapters in the book. Yeah, I want to try and get it out of the way by the end of this month, because reading a book should not be that hard work, Mr. Joyce. I know you spent a third of your life writing it, and Mike Tango Charlie says, spoiler alert, he made it all up. It's actually, I mean, the Campbell concordance to it, the skeleton key, is really interesting, because Campbell says, yes, this is a reference to St. So-and-so of so-and-so who did this in Ireland in AD 853. And it's like, right, that helps me how? And yeah, there are references to all sorts of people. It's really interesting actually seeing turns of phrase crop up from the 1930s, because at one point Joyce says about something or other, the blah 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 Hillman Minx, and it's like, the Hillman Minx is a car that they made in the 1960s, 25 years after Finnegan's Wake was invented. Did the people at Hillman decide that their car was going to be named after a phrase in Finnegan's Wake, or is it pure coincidence? There are so many turns of phrase, and one chapter in book 3, in fact it's the first chapter in book 3, starts off with the phrase 3 quarks for Mr. Mark. And yes, that's where physicists got the word quark from, which are the constituent parts of atomic particles. So there is an awful lot going on in Finnegan's Wake, and I would say that roughly 99% of it would have gone completely over my head were it not for the fact that I read the Joseph Campbell's concordance, the skeleton keys to Finnegan's Wake. And as a result of reading the Campbell skeleton key to Finnegan's Wake, I reckon that only 98% of Finnegan's Wake went completely over my head, like Heathrow. And yeah, it's the friction from so much stuff going over my head that has worn my head to the shine that it now possesses. Ryako Music says, lol. Couldn't have put it better myself. Shall we return to Ableton before I knock things on the head for tonight, or just go completely down the rabbit hole? So yeah, Pripyat pianos, for a bit of contrast between all the other stuff. The two different inspired by nature settings are going on. Life is fairly ambient. and there's two sections of it, so I've panned it left and right. And I've got Brian Eno albums that this would completely sound and fit in with perfectly. So what it's doing, there's a little sample file. Again, you can drop samples in, and it was playing the first half of the sample file, so I thought, I wonder what the other half sounds like. So I moved the window so that the other half of this pair of tracks is playing the other half of the sample, which at least means that they're in tune with each other. And if you're wondering about such things, not that by this point I'm sure anybody is still wondering about anything whatsoever other than where does he get his ideas from, it's in C sharp minor, but it's rather pretty. I rather like that. And then the delay, if I turn it back on, because it's still going on with the delay, and it will be going on with the delay for quite a while, because I've got the feedback on this on the longest ping pong, which is like 16 bars, 95% feedback. It's just going to keep doing its thing gently and just get 5% quieter every 16 bars until it gently fades away. And I've also got a return from that, which is going through a further vector delay, which is doing all sorts of very silly things. Let's turn that back down to 4, 5, 4. Let's have 4. There we go. And then a bit of Waves Mondo mod, because you've got to have a bit of chorus on your delayed ambient woozy goodness. You really have. So I'm just gonna leave that going for the rest of the show, I think. So we're coming up on 80 minutes so far. So I'll stay with you, if it's all right with you, till the top of the hour, and then we'll call it a night for tonight. Mike Tango Charlie says, I have Eno ambient apps that will do this to the end of time. Sometimes it's relaxing, other times a bit suffocating. There are some lovely ambient apps that Eno developed. There's one called Bloom, and I've forgotten the names of the rest, and we covered them actually, didn't we, in a recent edition of the stream, I believe. And they are now available not just for iPhone users, but for Android users as well. So I will probably be availing myself. Bloom, Trope, Air, those are the ones. Got them all on my old iPhone 3S back in the day when I was still an Apple fanboy. I am not anymore. In fact, I am not anymore. But so it goes. Yes. Checks, notes. So yeah, the point that I wanted to make with this sort of inspired by nature thing was to see just, oh no, says Mike Tango Charlie, I just bought an iPhone 12 mini. Are they on 12 now? My God. I think I had a 5S as well. I had a 3S, then a 5S. Raka Music says, I'm still waiting for my PC. Oh, you'll disappear for a week when you get it, because it will be moving from Mac ecosystem to PC ecosystem, and you will find all these lovely things that you can now get for the Mac that you couldn't get for the PC. And there are shed loads of really fun things that you can get for the PC that you can't get on the Mac. So if we go over to my bewildering array of things, so all of this stuff up here is stuff that I've got for making music, whether it be Melodyne, whether it be Chronomorph, whether it be Max 8, whether it be various standalone synths, Arturia's entire V collection of synths, or Native Access or Native Instruments Complete 13, various other stuff. Ryako Music says, I just hope that my workflow isn't too slowed down. Judging by the speed at which you were working on this system when we did our last collaboration, I don't think that's going to be a problem. And let's face it, if you're sticking with Ableton, then you shouldn't have a problem at all. Mike Tango Charlie is now explaining why he's got so many phones. Yes, security, indeed. Although, I mean, mobile phones and security are not two things that really are ever seen in public together, because mobile phones are such a security hazard. Like I say, I worked in some interesting locations, and in many of those locations, mobile phones, it wasn't a case of, well, you're not allowed to turn your mobile phone on. It's more a question of, you are not allowed to bring your mobile phone into the premises in any shape or form whatsoever. If you don't want the rest of the world to know what you're up to, then don't have your mobile phone in the same room. I mean, you've seen how this phone sometimes decides that I'm speaking to it rather than to you guys, and goes off and answers things that I didn't ask it. So that's why I've got it turned upside down. But it is a really good phone for taking photographs, and I took a phone photograph of the International Space Station going over this week. If you're in the UK, or actually probably in Belgium as well, this next day or two, there's a really nice super bright set of passes of the International Space Station taking place. And by super bright, I mean -3 magnitude, and that's bright. So if you want to check when the ISS is next going over where you live, know your latitude and longitude of your current location, and then go to this website, which is called Heavens Above, which is run by Chris Pete, who does a grand job. So in fact, as we speak, the ISS is creeping up on the UK and Belgium, and here the ISS will be going over super bright at 2057, so it's pretty much going to be out there for the next couple of minutes, going from the west to 50 degrees. Mike Tango Charlie says, behind you, duck, says Array of Emotions. So yeah, the next couple of minutes, basically, you may see this go over where you are. But there's another really bright pass tomorrow at 8:09 here. So I'm guessing it'll be a few minutes later for you guys in Belgium. And then another one, yeah, so it's the next, pretty much, so like tomorrow, day after, so that's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then they start dropping off a bit on Wednesday. But there's another fairly decent one on Thursday, but that's low, so the orbit will have drifted down. Nero says, are iridium flares still a thing? No, the satellites all got deorbited, I think, and replaced by more modern ones that aren't reflective. So, because Heavens Above used to be a great place, they would actually have here on this list, there would be a menu item for iridium flares. Iridium flares, if you're not familiar with them, they were basically Iridium was a global communications satellite network. They had huge solar panels on their satellites that were highly reflective, and if you got the angle of the sun right, then they would reflect the sun and they would shine so brightly that they were visible in broad daylight. And I used to occasionally go out and watch and get very odd looks from people in the street going, "What are you doing?" And I go, "There." At which point this little flare of light would suddenly burst into being and get brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter, and then fade away again. And it's like something out of a James Bond movie. Really, really cool. These days, the thing is all about Starlink. So Starlink is it Musk's? So it's basically he's ruining the night sky with these things, right? They're satellites. It's a constellation of communication satellites, and like the Iridium ones, they're highly reflective, although subsequent ones are a bit less reflective. And there's rather a lot of them. And you can see there are a few trains here, which are the current, so they spread out. But when they're launched, I think it's like 200 at a time, and then they gradually spew out and just become this ridiculous train of just thousands of satellites. I think at some point he wanted something like 20,000 of them. Mike Tango Charlie says 60 per launch. Thank you, Nick. It's just disgusting. A Rev Emotion says, are astronomers still pissed at Musk for those? Absolutely they are. Ryako Music says, why? That's what Starlink does to people trying to take pictures of the night sky. Oh dear, says Ryako Music. Indeed. It's rather a mess, isn't it? There are just so many of the damn things that it's ruining the night sky. Do we really need that much junk floating around up there in orbit? There was another collision between a communications satellite and something else this week that has caused loads and loads of debris, and as one of the astronomers that I follow on Twitter said, look, I've only watched Gravity once. I don't want to have to watch it again. Mike Tango Charlie says, I am a SpaceX fanboy, but I can understand the problem. There is so much junk up there. I wonder if at some point it's going to get harder to launch stuff into orbit just because of all the junk up there. Mate, we are already in that situation, and the Soyuz boosters that are docked with the International Space Station are sometimes used to adjust the orbit of the ISS upwards, because the ISS is at risk of collisions from other pieces of junk in orbit. And as Tim Peake tweeted from the International Space Station when he was up there on his mission a few years ago, there's a little ding in one of the cupola windows where something travelling at many thousands of miles an hour took a chunk out of one of the windows. The cupola windows in the thing that looks like the front of a TIE fighter, right? It's a little sort of windowed area on the International Space Station. Those windows are 15 centimetres thick for exactly that reason. If they were less, then something might punch a hole through them. Mike Tango Charlie says, Kessler syndrome, anyone? The problem visualized, says Neuro, yeah. The issue is, says Mike Tango Charlie, they are genuinely filling a gap in the internet infrastructure. There's an entire anime series based on the issue of space junk. First Devo record I ever bought was Space Junk, and that was a thing in the 70s, because in the 70s we were just worried, and Mike Tango Charlie should know this, living as he did in Tassie. Skylab, the original US space station, eventually deorbited, and large parts of it ended up in the Australian outback. It landed in West Australia. There you go. So thanks Mike Tango Charlie. But yes, I'm getting derailed again, aren't I? And bits of it landed in Western Australia, says Mike Tango Charlie. Yeah, it wasn't in the best of states anyway, because one of the solar panels failed and the heating didn't work, and they actually had to jury rig a heat shield with bits of tarpaulin over it. I mean, that's really says high tech, doesn't it? Landed, says Neuro in inverted commas. Yes, well, it's any landing that you can walk away. No, you wouldn't have walked away from this one. An entire space station landing would have been a pretty big deal, says Mike Tango Charlie. Aren't they worried that bits will fall on people? Most of this stuff, when it's going, because at the, let's get this right, at the altitude of the International Space Station, to be in orbit, you're travelling at 17,300-ish miles an hour. And if anything going through the atmosphere at 17,300 miles an hour tends to disintegrate and or burn up very, very rapidly, which is why you need lumps that are very, very solid, like iron or nickel iron or that sort of stuff, that are bigger than a bus, are the ones that you have to worry about. So the Chelyabinsk meteor was probably about the size of a double-decker bus, or a bit bigger than that, but it would have been very solid, and that didn't even reach the ground because the aerodynamic stress basically disintegrated it, and it was the shock wave from the explosion that did all the damage and blew out all the windows and knocked down all the walls in Chelyabinsk, because very little of the meteor actually hit the ground. Neura says, wasn't there a TV show in the 90s about a girl killed by the toilet from the Mir space station? If there was, that one escaped my attention, and that's kind of a memorable plot line. I think I'd probably have remembered that, but Mike Tango Charlie's there, he says, yes, there was. Go on then, what on earth was it called? Because now I'm going to have to want to watch that. Dead Like Me, and Mike Tango Charlie beat me to the punch. Oh, that's interesting. It was created by Brian Fuller, who also, if you are not aware, created American Gods, Hannibal, Pushing Daisies and Wonderfuls, and is co-creator of Star Trek Discovery. So, interesting. And that, yeah. Oh, it's got Mandy Patinkin in it as a Grim Reaper. Mandy Patinkin was, well, he's probably best known to you guys as Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die. But I first encountered Mandy Patinkin under an awful lot of prosthetic makeup, because he was also James Caan's partner. Was it James Caan? In the, oh God, what was it called? See, my memory works in strange ways. So I can remember that Mandy Patinkin's character was called Stangia Sorens. But I can't remember the name of the film. Alien Nation. Alien Nation. So, yeah, there you go. And I think Ableton has decided that it's pretty much gone to sleep. So I think what we will do at that point is I will also let you, so you can all go quietly off to sleep as well. Ryako Music says he was in Evita. He's a brilliant actor. He's also a very, very good musician. I have to say that too. So, thank you for hanging out with me in a not particularly music-focused evening. It has to be said, we did go off on one or two rather strange diversions, but so I have homework. I will find the photograph of me in personal protective gear underneath a nuclear reactor, and I will have that for you to marvel at next show on Sunday. At which point I will also be able to explain the connection between that photograph and Emmerdale, the ITV soap opera. So I bet you're all thrilled to find out what that connection is, aren't you? I can tell. I can tell by the way the chat has completely ground to a halt. Nice connection, says Mike Tango Charlie. Thank you. I do try. I do try. So I will be back with my aforementioned photograph of aforementioned me in personal protective equipment, complete with my dosimeter, on Sunday at... Now, this is going to get interesting, right? Because I will be back on Sunday at 9 p.m. British summertime, because yes, the clocks in the UK go forwards on Sunday morning at 2 a.m. So when it gets to 2 a.m. on Sunday, it will be 3 a.m. and I will have an hour's less sleep in bed. So maybe I just have to stay in bed for another week. Daylight savings, says Ryako Music. Indeed, which means that once again it will be dark when I wake up in the mornings, which is rather nice. Mike Tango Charlie says, I'm a flight sim geek, so I'm always on coordinated universal time. Good man. I'm an astronomer geek, and I do likewise. Ryako Music says, wish they would get rid of that. We actually had an experiment here in the UK back in the 1960s that provoked outcry, which was to go on to double summertime, which would basically have put us the same as the rest of the EU. And yeah, Britons being Britons, they were, oh, this is horrible. We don't want anything to do with Europe. Despite the fact that during the double summertime experiment, I think the death toll from road accidents during the evenings and during the mornings dropped. But I will have stats on that on Sunday night show, because I might be talking complete and utter pants. It wouldn't be surprising, really, frankly, given this show that has now been running for 45 weeks. Yes, this is show number 45, which means I'll be back on Thursday next week at 7:30 British summer time, which is 6:30 UTC. Mike Tango Charlie has come up. This is what the Sunday night show needs to be. Talking pants with headphones only is definitely my kind of show. Yeah, that's definitely got legs. If you see what I did there. I think on that note, I will bid you a very, very splendid evening. Whatever you're doing for the rest of the week, over the weekend, or in the coming week, please stay safe, stay healthy, stay well, stay sane, stay Wayne. Obey social distancing rules. Wear a damn mask, especially if you haven't had your COVID vaccine yet. And as Ryako Music says, good night, nerds. I'll see you next time.